Welcome back to the Vetted Conversations podcast, where we delve deep into the foundations, workings, and current challenges to the American way of self-governance. In today's confusing world, it's more important than ever to understand how our government works and how we, as citizens, can actively participate in the discussion to safeguard our liberties and continued freedom. Our mission is to ensure you, our listeners, have the knowledge and insights needed to become more informed and engaged citizens and active members of your communities. So let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Part of our mission here is to help increase our collective understanding of civics, namely our rights, and perhaps more importantly, our responsibilities to each other as citizens in a free society. Based on your feedback from Season 1, we are adding a short civics discussion to each episode in Season 2 to help better explain how our government is organized and how it is designed to work so that we can all more effectively engage with our elected and appointed officials and help create a more perfect union. Joining us today is Dr. Shawn Healy, a civics expert and the Senior Director for Policy and Advocacy at iCivics. iCivics is our nation's leading nonprofit civic education organization whose mission is to ensure the practice of democracy is learned by each new generation. Shawn, it's so good to have you back to educate us today. Here's our question for today's episode. We hear a lot of talk on the news and on news shows about our rights as citizens, but what are our responsibilities as citizens of the United States?
I think this answer is a little more subjective. Our responsibilities are really not formally defined, other than, of course, we have a responsibility to obey the laws, to file and pay taxes, etc. But since you asked, I'll give you a subjective answer. I think, one, we have a responsibility to vote regularly in elections, and not just every 4 years in presidential cycles. I would argue the most impactful elections are local elections, and unfortunately, they have some of the lowest turnout. So to be regular participants in voting, and then I always tell my students, governance happens between elections, right? And often as citizens, we exercise our right to vote, and then we kind of sit out the process by which policy is made. And of course, whether our candidates win or lose, the winners represent us, right? Represent all of us. And I think we have an obligation to be engaged in that process. So what does that mean? Well, I think on one important level, it's paying attention, right, to what's going on in government. And I think the best way to do that is to be a regular follower of the news. And one great thing in the current context is we have more access to information than ever before. And it's really critical that we cultivate a diverse media diet, right? Where we're not just consuming information that confirms our worldview, but probably information that challenges our worldview. And I think to do our very best to seek out objective information about what's going on in our government. It's important we be engaged in our community. So volunteering is critical to that end. That we be good neighbors. We exchange favors with our neighbors, that we work with our neighbors to solve problems in communities, to exercise our freedom of petition, right, which is, I think, the most underappreciated freedom in the First Amendment to our Constitution, to contact legislative officials, to contact administrative officials, to address issues that are important, personal concern to us, and hopefully also to the broader community, and then to engage in these debates. In fact, I like to say America is a debate, but to do so in follow the norms of civil discourse. So we can disagree vehemently about the issues, but let's be respectful of one another. So those are just some examples I see as responsibilities of citizens. Of course, they're responsibilities and skills that need to be taught. So these are important civic skills, civic behaviors that I think we need to teach and to practice regularly.
I love it, because it's a great reminder that before our ancestors were citizens, they were subjects of the King of England and told what to do, right? So I think, if you want to choose your own course and direct the future of the country, then that takes involvement, and involvement takes making good decisions, and making good decisions takes education and sound information, which talks about like how important things like public education and libraries and a free press were to the founders of the country. So, in order for us to make good decisions as citizens, we need good information upon which to do that. And you've made a great case for what we should do or aspire to be as citizens of the United States. Thank you for that. One of the main themes at Vet Our Democracy podcast is that democracy isn't a spectator sport. In our system, we the people are the final check on power. And as one of my favorite authors, Hunter S. Thompson, once said, in a democracy, you got to be a player. We have a guest today in studio who exemplifies this activity at the local level, and that is Mike Cantwell. Mike is a Navy veteran who also spent some time over at the National Geospatial Agency, but more importantly, I think, in post-military life, has been extremely active in his local community in a independent and nonpartisan way. So I just wanted to welcome Mike to the show today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Joe. Love everything you're doing with Vet the Vote.
Thanks. No, it's good to have you here and good to have Veterans for All Americans. I know you're affiliated with that program as part of the Vet the Vote Coalition for 2024. So we had Todd and Eric were on the show recently. Hey, one thing I'd like to start by asking you is, like, what did you do for the Navy and what was your proudest moment?
Yeah, so my father was in the Air Force, and his last duty station was near the Naval Academy. So I was always attracted to service and going to the Naval Academy. I graduated in 1987 and served aboard 2 warships before I affiliated with the Navy Reserves. And I stayed with the Reserves until retiring in 2015. But I really established roots in Arlington, Virginia. So I've been living in Arlington since about 1993, and living with my wife and 3 children. We moved here. And I just started getting involved in the normal things you get involved in. I did a lot of youth sports coaching, baseball, flag football, soccer, softball. And then I just was really attracted to, what can I do to help my community? So I joined my local civic association here in Arlington. We have about 30 different neighborhood or civic associations. So I was on the executive committee for a while, and then the president stepped down, and I raised my hand and said, "Hey, I want to do this." So I've been the president of the Yorktown Civic Association for about 10 years now. So we do things like, we figure out what's going on in our community. Sometimes we meet with our local elected leaders, and sometimes we write letters. Sometimes we speak in front of the Arlington County Board, and just really get involved at the really, really local level. So citizens will stop by. I live right on a pretty main road here in Arlington, and I'll be pulling weeds in the front yard, and they'll stop by and say, "Hey, Mike, we got a really big problem with, speeding through the neighborhood, or graffiti, or, hey, the school says they're going to expand. What about parking?" And so I meet with my executive committee. We come up with various policy positions, and then we write letters and go to the Arlington County Board. So I really found that I really like it, and I'm really pretty good at it. So I really encourage other veterans to consider serving at their local level.
Awesome. No, that's I think part of understanding civics and our rights and responsibilities as citizens is how to petition our elected officials, right? It's written into the Constitution that's a right of all Americans, and freedom of assembly being another one. What from your military background kind of led you in that direction? Like, was there anything that you can think of that made you want to serve your community again?
Well, it probably goes back a little bit to my childhood. I mean, I just distinctly remember my parents, it'd be a little bit annoying because they'd want to watch both the 6:30 news and the 7:30 news, and I couldn't watch my, Hogan's Heroes or some of the other reruns and everything. But my parents were always up on current events and civic affairs. And just, I would say, being in service, being in the Naval Academy, in the military, it's like part of your DNA. You want to give back, and then just the leadership abilities, being able to form a coalition, being able to make things happen, being able to inspire others to act, is something that we all learn in the military, and I think I was pretty effective at it.
Yeah, no, and that speaks to me as well. I think one of the strengths of military service is how, as an institution, it takes people from all over the country, geographic regions, all walks of life, and it's one place where I see people at a massive scale setting apart their differences and focusing on a common goal of supporting and defending our Constitution. So, um, that makes a lot of sense to me. But the other thing that you said about getting involved at the local level, I think is really important, because a lot of veterans, decry the military civilian gap. It's just kind of, they're like, oh, America, we've been at war for 2 decades and people don't understand us or our experience. And rather than commiserating with them, one of the first things I like to do is kind of turn that around a little bit and be like, hey, if you feel like there's a gap, what steps have you taken towards your community? And that usually gives them a little bit of pause to think, because I'm like, if you're waiting for them to come to you, you're going to be waiting a long damn time. So if you're looking for tribe, you're looking for connection, that's up to you. What do you think about that? I mean, what are your experiences with veterans transitioning out of the military and then trying to find that same sense of purpose and belonging in their
Yeah.
local community?
Well, first of all, I would start with your local veteran service organization. I'm very involved in my local VFW. We have a great sense of community. I host a monthly Jeopardy style trivia night. That's a whole bunch of fun. People in the local neighborhood come in. I mean, we bring them in as guests. It's a great time. But also petitioning local elected officials. I noticed that we don't have a parade here in Arlington for 4th of July or for Memorial Day. I've never seen one of the Arlington County board members attend any of the commemoration events in Arlington, which is really just shocking in a certain way. I've never seen them attend the wreath laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. Yeah, maybe they couldn't be with the president doing it, but they could probably be in the third row in the background, especially when we have a president of the same party. So
Yeah.
I think I've made a little bit of inroads there. We have some new county board members who have heard my pleas for this and have shown up while they were campaigning at a wreath laying ceremony here in Arlington. So hopefully we'll make a little bit of change and get the elected officials to participate in some of these events.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And some of my fondest memories since departing the military in the civilian space have been, where my local town was like, hey, can you come and give this speech for Memorial Day this year or Veterans Day? And that was kind of a fun way to engage people and also, get to know the people who live around you a little bit better.
Well, and you may be familiar with in this area of Wreaths Across America. So
Right. Yeah.
it's a fantastic event in early December where tens of thousands of wreaths are laid at Arlington National Cemetery.
Yeah.
And I've been participating in that for several years. It's a wonderful event. And they have these at all the national cemeteries throughout the country. But shouldn't a Arlington County board member be participating in that also and taking a few pictures and putting it on their social media? To me, those are minimum things that they can do that doesn't cost them a dime, just maybe a few hours of their time, right? So hopefully some of them will see this and be inspired to participate in some of these events.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying we had in the Marines was like, you show what's important as a leader by where you put your body, right? Where do you show up? So I think that's a good reminder for anyone serving an elected office today. When we talk about running for office, and I know you ran as an independent, I want to go into that a little bit, because when, in the military, kind of discussing partisan politics is just not done. It's kind of unseemly, definitely looked down upon. At least that was my experience in the Marine Corps. Is, we had a saying, if your troops know your politics, then you're failing as a leader. So, I think a lot of that carries over with veterans into civilian life, where, some of us have a healthy distrust of people who want that type of power. Some of us just have an ick factor when it comes to like the partisan infighting. But when we look at the local level, right, like I'm talking county, town, and on down, Most of those places and most municipalities are not partisan offices, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because I think if more veterans knew that you didn't have to run as a Republican or Democrat for these offices, they might be more likely to get involved. And I just want to take your thoughts on that.
So under current Virginia law, and I think this is probably the same throughout the country, local offices are by law nonpartisan. And what that means is that your name appears on the ballot and there is no I, D, or R or G next to your name. And they can still have some sort of primaries or caucus or something to determine who the party nominee is. But on that general election ballot, your party affiliation will not appear.
Yeah.
So once I learned that, and I really studied the Hatch Act, because at the time I was a federal government employee in the intelligence community, and the Hatch Act says that's even an extra layer of being careful on what you do. So I contacted the Hatch Act people and I said, look, I'm really thinking about running for Arlington County Board as an independent. And I read the Hatch Act. I think I'm good on this, but can you please write me a letter saying that I'm within the law, kind of my get out of jail free card, right? So they wrote this wonderful, legal opinion with all the legalese saying like, yep, you can run for Arlington County Board as an independent. There's nothing stopping you. The only things you can't do is you can't solicit your employees for money, and you can't do various things. I'm like, yep, I'm all good with that, right?
And for the audience out there who might be unfamiliar with the Hatch Act, could you just give us a couple sentences about like what?
Sure. By the way, I'm a huge fan of the Hatch Act. So basically, it says that that federal government employees cannot engage in partisan political activities, and they define what these partisan political activities are. So holding fundraisers, what you say, what you do online, and it usually will prevent a federal government employee from running for a partisan office. So, you can't have a federal government employee for running for U.S. Senate or for president. You can't even have them run for state delegate or state senator, because, as you probably know, is that all election laws are run from the state, right? They're not run federally. But you're usually pretty good, even if you're a federal government employee, that you can run for local office as long as it's nonpartisan local office. But it's been around for a long time, and unfortunately, there are politicians who violate it frequently, and I do think it needs to be updated a little bit for that.
Yeah. But the positions that you're talking about, like county board of commissioners, mayor, treasurer, registrar, dog catcher, right? Like these are like local positions that really, maybe more than state or federal positions, affect the daily lives of the people that live in that town more than anything.
Yeah, and let me tell you a little bit about my decision to run, and then a little bit about my campaign. So here I was. I'm really active in my community. I'm the president of the Yorktown Civic Association, which is a geographical place within Arlington. I represent approximately 1,000 households in this geographic area, and I just felt that I had a good feel for what the citizens of this area cared about. And so we had an incumbent Democrat, we had kind of a right-leaning independent, and then kind of a left-leaning independent. So it was kind of a little bit bizarre because we had one Democrat and 3 independents running. And then I did everything you need to do to run a successful campaign. I mean, I did my friends and family phone calls and emails saying, hey, can you donate some money to my campaign? I did yard signs, I did flyers, and then I did a lot of debates. So we had 6 debates during this time.
Wow.
And I had a website, did all the getting enough signatures to run. So the bar is pretty low in Arlington. I needed to get 125 signatures to get my name on the ballot. That's not unreasonable. Some places around the country are completely unreasonable for independent candidates or other third-party candidates. That's something that hopefully the democracy movement can help and everything.
Wait, so if in some communities, what you're telling me is if you run as an independent, then you have to get way more signatures than you do if you're affiliated with one party. Right?
Absolutely. It is shocking in some
Mm,
parts of the country the
yeah.
barriers to entry for independent or third party candidates.
Okay.
Parties have their own nomination methods, but
Mm,
in my opinion, it should be reasonable, easy for anyone to run for political office in America is how
right.
I feel.
And again, those are
So
more like the state and on up positions typically.
they are, but it can even go down to the lower level where they just
Yeah.
raise the barrier so high, and yeah, it's just really, really bad. But again, I
Okay.
really hope people reach out to me if they want to run as an independent and have any questions. I'm
Yeah.
available for that, and it was really I really enjoyed it. First of all, I love talking to, knocking on doors is the greatest thing. It's great about America, listening to people's concerns or what they care about. And here's another thing that I think is really important for your listeners is that if you're running as a Republican, you are given a list from your party on the doors you should knock, right?
Hmm.
They only care about you knocking on Republican doors. So
Hmm.
you will literally get a list of addresses, and you'll skip this house, you'll skip that house, because they don't care they don't want you to talk to independents or Democrats.
Huh.
And I'm like, this is crazy. I would go to a neighborhood with my flyers, and I would knock on every door, one after the other, right?
Yeah.
And when I would go to a farmer's market or something, I didn't ask people if they were a Republican or a Democrat. I asked them if they resided in Arlington, right? So
Right.
they were a registered voter. So I think we need to get back to that where anyone running for public office is talking to all voters, not just voters in their party.
That makes sense. Yeah. I wonder if the D side does the same thing. I'd
Oh,
imagine
absolutely. They
they
totally
probably
do.
do. Yeah.
Totally do.
Um, so if like, where do I get started? Like if I'm out here listening and I'm like, you know what, Mike's right. Maybe I should look into public service in my community. What's the first step?
Well, first of all, get involved in everything at your local level. I received 2 emails today because I'm the president of the Yorktown Civic Association.
Yeah.
They are begging people to join committees and commissions, right?
Okay.
So you got your planning committee, you have your public service committee, you have your police oversight committee, and they can't find citizens to do it. Yes, it takes time out of your day. But it's really, really important work. Zoning, pedestrian safety, transportation. These are all committees that most local governments have. So I would
Right.
start with that. Is there a civic association that similar to what I have? Are there other things? Dip your toe in the water with some of those before you run for office, because
Yeah.
let's be frank, there's a little bit of an ego factor of people running for office,
Sure.
and then there are some like crazy reasons, like somebody's a real estate agent and they know if they get their name on the ballot it'll help them get business or something like that. You don't want to be that person, right?
Right. Right.
And then there are some military people who run for Senate or something, and they
Yeah.
have zero experience running for lower level elected office, or more importantly, serving in lower level elected
Yeah.
office. But last year I did form an organization called Independence for America, and anybody can Google it online. And I'm all about telling the stories of local and state independent candidates,
Yeah.
and also helping independent candidates running for office. So
Yeah.
I do think it's really important to hear the stories of people who won, and are now serving. And then there are many of these people are veterans. So it's
Yeah.
important to hear their stories and then give them the help they need in their campaigns.
That's interesting, and I think you have a growing population of independents too. This is interesting. I saw it before our talk. Pulled up a recent Gallup poll. So this was reported out, well, April of 2023. So a little bit dated, but the data is interesting. So in 2004, 35% of Americans identified as Democrats, 33% as Republicans. and 31 as independents. And then you fast forward almost 20 years to 2023, both Republicans and Democrats affiliations have decreased down to 25%, while independents are now up to 49%, right? So 31% in 2004 up to 49%. I mean, what that's telling me is half of America is unaffiliated with a political party. They might lean in one direction or another, but consider themselves to be independents, myself included. So,
I mean, it is the largest growing, quote, political party that we have. The
yeah,
Republicans and the Democrats are shrinking, whereas independents are rising. And
yeah,
it's really important to think about that. But here's another little anecdote from my knocking on doors is I never had a door slammed in my face because I
yeah,
wasn't wearing a red t-shirt and I wasn't wearing a blue t-shirt.
right,
And they would normally give me a few minutes of their time to say, and I got a lot of, oh, I'm so glad you're an independent. I'm an independent too, and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. But there are challenges to running as an independent. You don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the donations, you don't have the money. And in Arlington, it's even harder. And I hope to change this over the next few years. But every county board member is elected at large. So there's 240,000 people in 24 square miles in Arlington. So
yeah,
me getting my message out to 240,000 people is really, really difficult. If we had districts, I really think I could win Northwest Arlington, right? So
right.
if I could only target my message to Northwest Arlington, I think I could win. So this is the things that I want your listeners to really understand is the nuances of what's at large, what's districts, and how does that affect your ability to win an election.
That makes sense. Yeah, because it's easier to communicate with 80,000 people than 240,000, right?
Absolutely.
And depending on
Absolutely.
geography, and I mean, there's so many, large municipalities, large counties. One part could be very, very different for the other. Um, I mean, even thinking about here, where we've got a smattering of towns, but most of it's rural. Like the interests of folks are very different, right? The farmers are more thinking about ranching and farming and issues and water rights and all the rest of it. Folks in the city might be thinking more about, I don't know, parking, paving, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that makes sense. So the first step is kind of get involved in the community, join the Chamber of Commerce if you're a business person, check out the local civic organizations,
Well,
volunteer.
PTA and PTA
Yeah,
and youth sports coaching, right?
yeah,
So I had a lot of people. I like pulled out my list of my kids' t-ball team from 10 years ago. I started
yeah.
emailing them, right? Because they were people who trusted me with their children, right? So
Mhm.
maybe I
Yeah,
can trust you with my children. Maybe I can trust you to run for Arlington County Board.
yeah, for sure. And then, so once somebody decides to pull the trigger on this and say, okay, well, I'm in. I'm going to run for city council. I'm going to run for county board of commissioners. Like, what's the next step?
Well, it's really great in America that most of the small cities and counties around the country they have a director of elections, they have a website, and usually they have very clear instructions on what it takes to run for office. And then at the state level, they also have the infrastructure to tell you what you have to do. So yeah, you have to file forms, and you have to open a bank account. You have to collect petition signatures
Yeah,
of citizens that reside there to run. And then you need to kind of create a team and get enough volunteers and hold fundraisers, just be out and about a lot, go to farmers markets, knock on doors. But none of this is insurmountable. A lot of people in our country, sadly, are really such a defeatist mode, and they think that they can't do anything about it. And there are a lot of things that are not even in our Constitution, as you know, Joe.
hmm,
Um, the word political parties are not even in the Constitution.
for
And
sure.
one of our best presidents, George Washington, was our last independent president. And Abraham Lincoln was our last third party president, right?
Right.
So we have some good representatives of what it's like when people are independent or a third party. Uh, primaries are not in the Constitution. So that's really important. And I'd love to talk a little bit about the primary problem if you have a few moments, and some of the
Sure.
solutions to the primary problem.
Yeah, let's dive in, because I'm curious, like, especially, I know in the state of Virginia it's open primaries, so I got to pick which party's primaries I wanted to vote in this year. But in places that aren't, it's kind of like, why are the voters paying for a private club to select their candidate, right? So I mean, like, yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this, like the primary problem as you see it.
So several years ago, I got involved in an organization called Unite America, and this organization is run by an amazing young man named Nick Troiano. And over the last few years, they did a lot of deep study. They got a lot of smart people on the staff, and they realized that the biggest problem we have are partisan primaries. And
Yep.
partisan primaries haven't been around our whole history of our country. That's not in the Constitution. In the old days, there would be party bosses in smoke-filled rooms who would select the nominee for a political party, both at the federal, state, and local levels. Some people thought that we needed to reform that, and we needed to have more citizen input in that. And so they said, well, let's have these things called primaries. And so people originally it was a little bit more democratic, a little bit more, but over the years it became completely warped. And Nick and others have determined that it is the biggest problem are partisan primaries. So across the country, I'll just stay at the federal level, is that some states have closed primaries. So you have to register with a political party in order to vote in a party primary. And then there are open primaries like Virginia, where you can show up on election day and say, hey, I want a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot, but you don't have to register ahead of time. But then we have the innovators like Alaska, who have created a new system, which we like calling the Alaska model, which is nonpartisan primaries.
Yeah.
So how that works is that everyone running for a certain office gets put on the primary ballot list, and then voters just choose their top choice. And then the top four from the primary go on to the general election. So it is not partisan. It is a nonpartisan primary. And Nick and others believe that this is so important to our reforming our political system. So in that election in 2022, Lisa Murkowski, who is a moderate Republican senator, longstanding, been in office for a long time, she made it to the top four for the general election, and then she was reelected as a senator. Most people think if she had to run in a partisan Republican primary, she would probably lose, because she would be, it's now a verb, she would have been primaried from her right, and she probably would have not been made it through her partisan primary.
Yeah.
And then for the state representative, the entire state of Alaska only has one representative. And so they went through this process. We had some people you may have heard of, like Sarah Palin was on the ballot. But because of nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting, the people of Alaska were able to better express their choices, and they ultimately selected a moderate Democrat to fill that seat. And some people say, oh, well, this caused the Republicans to lose. But it really is a common sense reform that doesn't favor any political party. What it does is it more closely responds to the majority of the voters.
I love that, because I think it also helps drive the conversation towards the center where most Americans are, right? I think we've got arguably the best system of elections in the world. As a poll worker and an election official in the state of Virginia now, I'm definitely biased, but based on my experiences, what I've seen in the state of Maryland previously, and then now in Virginia, I feel really good about like any citizen going to the polls, their vote's going to count and it's going to be accurately tabulated and tallied. I think the greater problem is where you're talking about is like the system by which, we have the menu of choices, right? Because right now, if I'm looking at this Gallup poll, essentially we have, one political party that represents about 25% of the country and another one that represents the other 20%, serving up candidates for 100% of us to choose from. And, it's just kind of like, what happens if I don't really find a home in either political party, then I just have to hold my nose and pick, from the least bad choice, where this system seems like it's going to offer like some really optimistic choices about candidates, right? I think in our system of economics, like more competition is better and typically serves the consumer more. And, I think Todd said, hey, we would never allow a duopoly in business, but here we are in politics and elections allowing, two political parties basically to run everything. So,
Oh, absolutely. And I've been involved in this political reform movement for many years now. And when we have new volunteers coming into Veterans for All Voters, I give them a PowerPoint deck of, hey, this is how you get involved. The first thing the first bullet is get smart, right?
yeah.
Meaning, understand the nuances of our political process, of our election process. So many people don't even understand what a caucus is or a primary is and how they're different. Many people don't understand open primaries and closed primaries. Some people don't even understand what a board of supervisor member does. And
Right.
your local government is like probably the most important thing because they're your local taxes and your police and your firefighters and your safety and your zoning. All that
Yeah.
is done at the local level. So we have a lot of people in this country. It's a very sad thing that they don't understand and they have no interest in understanding, which I just think is shocking that you don't have the curiosity. And then they get radicalized because they think that their voices aren't heard. But they don't even understand the system of how it works. And things like primaries are not in the Constitution. So we have the agency to change those either through the state legislature or through ballot initiatives. And we really need people to get mobilized and activated in a positive way. I mean, obviously, we don't want people, raising arms in their elections. We want them to get involved in more civic activities.
Yeah, as the founders of the country intended. So I think you've given us a lot to think about today. So just to kind of recap, if for the listeners out there who are interested, maybe even as a result of this conversation, to consider running for local elected office, where can they find out more?
Yeah, I'm going to mention a few organizations. Veterans for All Voters. I encourage everybody to take a look at that online. Another organization is called New Politics, and
Okay.
New Politics provides campaign training for anyone who has served. Right, so it could have been the military, it could have been the Peace Corps, it could have been Teach for America. They're an amazing organization that provides extremely high level training for anyone that wants to run for office. And then even other organizations like the League of Women Voters, they're a wonderful organization too. And all these organizations need a diverse group of people to join. I love my League of Women Voters ladies, but a lot of them are older and whiter, right? So we need other people to join these organizations and get involved. And the other great thing about this pro-democracy movement is we form these great coalitions, right? So we all show up in Richmond and we're representing different organizations, but we're all for a common mission, which is to help our democracy.
Awesome. I think that's a great thought to end on. Mike, we really appreciate your time and your wisdom and knowledge today. You've given us a lot to think about, so thank you so much.
All right, Joe, it's great to be a guest on your show, and I really hope more people get involved in our democracy.
In order to help strengthen American democracy, we run into thousands of people and hundreds of organizations who are all doing their part to make their bit of America better for everyone. So to that end, we're going to start highlighting partner organizations and their leaders to bring them to your attention. And there are many ways to serve our country after leaving the military. And there are many great groups across our country who can use your talents and your energy. There's an old saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And when we challenged ourselves in 2022 to help America close 120,000 deficit in election poll workers, we banded together with like-minded people, formed Vet the Vote, and recruited the next generation of American election poll workers. You know what? More than 63,500 of you responded. Today, we're spotlighting one of our newest members of the Vet the Vote Coalition, More Perfect Union. More Perfect Union is a nationwide movement to strengthen our communities and heal our country by creating meaningful connections through service and leadership. And joining us today from More Perfect Union is U.S. Army combat veteran and co-founder and executive director, Garrett Cathcart. Garrett's a leader among post-9/11 veteran organizations. Prior to joining More Perfect Union, he served as the founding executive director of Mission Roll Call, which is a nationwide organization that provides veterans a powerful and unified voice in public policy, and as the first Southeast Regional Director of Veteran Service Organization Team Red, White, and Blue, which many of you know. Garrett served 9 years in the U.S. Army as a cavalry officer and is a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Garrett, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Sorry, I was on mute there. I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys.
We're excited to have you.
Garrett.
So, what can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like what led you to this work?
Yeah, I never would have thought I'd be a nonprofit guy, certainly, or working in democracy or veteran service before that. But I grew up in Indiana, in Indianapolis. And even as a small kid, I loved reading. I was a bit of a nerd. And in the third grade, I told my mom, I read all these books about military leaders. I'm like, I read this thing called West Point. I said, Mom, I'm going to go to West Point. And I told her in the third grade, she kind of patted me on the head. But I never ended up losing that dream. And so ended up applying to one college, which was West Point, got in. And then 9/11 was my sophomore year. And so kind of dramatically, obviously changed the course of the direction. Actually, my roommate and I tried to quit West Point on the list because we thought we were going to miss the war. And my tactical officer was like, "You're an idiot, Cathcart. Go back to class." I was like, "Yes, sir." And how right he was to this day. But also, obviously, the 20 some odd year wars in both. And so I commissioned and went into armor branch and then sub branch as cavalry, which is reconnaissance and direct action. And so kind of straight out of West Point after all the schools, my first job besides mowing lawns for cash was as a scout platoon leader in Baghdad during the surge.
Wow.
And that was kind of my crucible year, hard year. Company commander killed in action. I was in an ambush and 4 of my own soldiers were killed in action in a pretty traumatic way. And I recovered the remains and then on and on for the rest of the year. And then my best friend from West Point was killed in action. And so, that was kind of the beginning of the career. And then you train up for a year and you come home. And the second year, I was supposed to be a staff officer. And the squadron commander comes out and is like, "Garrett, you suck at making slides." I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "We need a major to go train the Iraqi army and live with them." I was like, "Okay, sir." I was a young captain. I was really putting one and one together. He's like, "Garrett, I'm asking you, do you want to go live with the Iraqi army and operate?" I was like, "Yes, sir." So I left the office and got to live with the Iraqi army for my second year in Iraq and tried to quit the army a couple times. And the first time they threw away my paperwork and they told me I was going to command a cavalry troop in Afghanistan. I said, I can't say no to that. So I stayed in and got to lead a lot of 128 guys in Afghanistan for a year and came back and ended up being aide to a 2-star. But all that to get to where I am now, I got out of the army and I was talking to some folks in the government for other jobs. So ended up following a girl to LA, as you do, and moved to Orange County, got a job in med device sales in Beverly Hills. So straight from Afghanistan and Army to Beverly Hills.
Wow, culture shock.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm telling neurosurgeons my stories and making them laugh, and orthopedic surgeons selling my back screws, and then I'm standing in operating rooms at Cedars-Sinai during surgery. I'm like, dude, what is happening? I have no background in sales or science or medicine. And very quickly I was, pretty unhappy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, dude, why am I unhappy? I'm living in this awesome spot, great gig, going out with these docs, having a good time. And then ironically, a guy I met once in Afghanistan called me out of the blue, a guy named Joe Quinn, who's now one of my best friends. He formerly led Headstrong, but he was sent out to study me because I had made friends with a bunch of Afghan militia Mujahideen fighters and convinced them to fight outside of the traditional kind of channels. And he said, Cathcart, come help us build this thing called Team RWB. It's like for veterans. I was like, Joe, I like you, buddy, but I don't want to be poor, and I don't really care about veterans. So appreciate you, man. And then I went and like I worked out with him in LA, and I was like, oh man, this is what I miss is making fun of Navy dudes, like work community. I didn't know the words at the time, right? Purpose, camaraderie, help, service to others. And so that kind of began my career where I'm in now in nonprofit leadership. And from there, I was asked by one of the funders of RWB to build this new organization called Mission Roll Call, which is policy focused. And by the end of that, I could text 1.3 million veterans by zip code and ask them questions. So, that means I could text by congressional district, and got the attention of a lot of lawmakers. And then I could kind of pause there and we get into the genesis of More Perfect Union. Yeah, well, that's what we want to hear next. So you go from med device sales, which I can imagine was an unbelievable culture shock. Then you were exposed to some different hospitals between there and your military career, but then okay, so you've done now a couple of organizations and nonprofit. How and why did you get involved and help to stand up More Perfect Union? That's a great question, and it all comes back to a guy named Jake Harriman, who's the founder and an awesome dude. Briefly on his story, he did a lot of work in Africa at a place called Nuru International, which was veterans and aid workers in some denied areas and hard areas to prevent terrorism through providing employment, right, and preventing poverty. He comes back after living abroad for 7 or 8 years, and so he comes back to the U.S. in like 2016 or 15 for the first ever Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. And he looks around and is like, dude, what happened to this country? Yeah, I haven't been here in 8 years. And you guys hate each other's guts. This is insanity. And so it was his original idea is let's use veterans somehow to bring America back together, because veterans are the only ones. It's the only respected institution left, right? It still pulls about 70% that everyone, at least mildly respects and will listen to for a minute or two. And so this is how he's smart. He's like, Garrett, I heard you built some stuff with RWB and Mission Roll Call. Let's do a couple calls. Can you give me some advice? Like by the third or fourth call, he's like, come to DC. I love what you're telling me. Tell me more. And by the fourth one, he's like, do you want to do this for me? The plan you just told me. I was like, the whole time he was recruiting me, not me giving him advice, which was kind of genius. It's like, this is crazy, but I love it and I'm in. And so it is, we are not a veteran organization. We're an organization for all Americans, but it is led by veterans in the first phase as a convening authority. And so that was the idea, is how do we get veterans to lead in their communities and get people to connect in real life through service projects, civic engagement, leadership development, and then have some real authentic conversations to get to know each other in order to, depolarize and kind of turn down the temperature in the country. Yeah. Yeah, I love that because, I think we are the United States, last I checked, and we typically do our best when we come together to collaborate and build consensus around the hard problems, which we see precious little of in Washington these days. And you're right, like, among both sides of the political spectrum, veterans still carry tremendous regard within the country. And that's something that Ellen and I know you and Jake really want to defend, right? That center Absolutely. Space and the reputation of our community, because it's just so important for many, many reasons. Could you tell us a little bit more about More Perfect Union? And you had a term in our last conversation about brickyards. Like, what are those? And could you paint us the picture about what the purpose is and how they run? Yeah, absolutely. You hit our mission, right? We are a veteran-led movement to heal the country and create connection through our 3 pillars of service, civics, and leadership development. So a brickyard is our word for chapter, right? It is in any city that there's a brickyard, there's a leadership team, all volunteer, led by veterans, but also on their leadership staff, leaders in the community that are not veterans, right? And usually we encourage from diverse backgrounds, because that's how, the magic sauce is that you show up and there's a diversity of people in the room. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Yeah. And so in every event that we do, the model is we do a connection event. We build trust and rapport and relationships through one of our 3 pillars of service, civics, or leadership. And, that is really on the brickyard leader. That takes the form of, in Atlanta, we built a house with Habitats of Humanity and then sat down to a meal. They've done in DC, they've gone to the Smithsonian and have a conversation about what they saw and why. Chicago, they've done a like drive for students. I think in Colorado, they just had a coffee with the police department and marginalized communities. And so we're really a platform for leaders, and we provide resources, aka dollars, right? And also structure. But after we connect, we sit down and we have what we call a healing conversation over usually really good food, right? Because it's hard to be mad and hard to not have a good time when you're eating something amazing and drinking some good stuff. And so all those conversations are based around our core values. And our most popular has been around our core value of hope. It's just 3 questions, a conversation around the American dream. And it's just like, Joe, what's the American dream mean to you? It's designed to pull out stories. And who are you? And, this is what it means to me. And, Ellen, who's someone that personifies that to you? And, the answers you get from me is it's my grandmother, it's this person, this person I served with. And so like, we don't explicitly talk about like, I love Braver Angels. I go to their stuff, but it's a different model. Like I'm on the red team, you're on the blue team. Let's talk about, the Second Amendment. I want to get to know Ellen and Joe as human beings and where you're from. Right. And then later I'll find out you're a certain political persuasion. Like, really? But that guy's awesome. I didn't know that he was, red team or blue team. And so that's kind of the art and science of it. It's a simple thing we do is getting people together and building relationships, but in practice, incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. After you.
I was going to say, I mean, what's so true. I mean, I'm living that life, right? I'm a military spouse. My husband's active duty. I do not live in a friendship silo like a lot of people I know. I don't live in a media silo. And, I meet someone who I'm connected with because of, my husband's job in the military and our military unit or command or where we live. And there are 15 other things I get from that person before I find out their politics. Like, before I have followed them on Instagram and see what kind of stuff they post, I'm like, can you take care of my kids? Do we need to make meals for someone who just had a baby? What's going on in the unit? Are we doing a walk for someone who's passed away? Like we do all that before we even think about politics. And we're lucky.
The community in the military and military spouse community, which is what we're trying to build at MPU, is taking those notes and those lessons. Some of our best leaders, frankly, are military spouses that we send. All of our leaders we send to the University of Montana, where we train them on a 4 or 5 day fellowship in Missoula. But that sense of community, and it's right. Like, hey, someone's sick, so they need a casserole, or can I pick? Right? It's that.
Right. That's what we do.
Call someone who's a friend, right? And it's not. Do you watch my news station? Right? Can I trust you? We built the trust ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's 2024? What's in store for 2024 for More Perfect Union?
I'm not sure if you know this or not, but there's a presidential election in 2024.
No way.
It's going to be chaos. And so 2024 is really about building the foundation infrastructure to be able to have national impacts, right? And that is not only in cities that we're in, brick and mortar cities, I call them, where brickyards are. That'll be 33 cities in 2024. That those are people, volunteer leaders, and leadership development teams in every city that we're in. But also, what we're developing programs. If you don't live in one of those 33 cities, how do you get involved in real life? You get your shirt in the mail. You do programming where you live, right? And what are most popular has been this the coffee club, where we buy the coffee and you invite people just to drink coffee and ask about who they are. It's not the whole model. It's a smaller version kind of outreach. But 24 is we've got some templates of cities we want to go, like the most polarized, the most politically homogenous, meaning all left or all right. But also one of the biggest programs I'm proud of is we have a really big rural program. Rural America is half of the country, right? And traditionally, it's really hard to get into. And my grandfather was a farmer in small town Indiana. My dad is from a town called Seymour, Indiana, which is the town that John Mellencamp's from and wrote the song Small Town about. And so I grew up in the big city of Indianapolis. So like I've got a heart for both. But we've got an incredible leader, a Marine colonel who's a special operations battalion commander who lives in Idaho, who's running all of our rural programs. And he's building things in Idaho and Eastern Oregon and growing from there into Wyoming. And we've got places in Indiana. And so getting to rural America and connecting them to the rest of the country is something I'm excited about and proud of, because it's hard to do, right? I mean, similar to the military community and other communities, those are tight communities and outsiders aren't really who are you? What do you want? Is the first question, right? Mm-hmm. So they just drove. One of our program managers, Trip O'Connell and Vaughn, just drove from Boise and did like this 5-day road trip all through rural America, almost on a listening tour, meeting people, hearing them, and two of those folks want to start brickyards now. And so, but is that literal work of, you know, going to places, sitting in diners, meeting people, and asking them what they think? That's the kind of the seeds of our growth.
Yeah, and doing it from a position of curiosity, right?
That's right, curiosity.
Genuine human connection and curiosity. It's not like I'm coming in here to have a debate. I'm coming in here to like challenge my own beliefs and better understand your point of view. Right?
Yeah, what's important to you? What's important to this town, right? It's not always politics, right? You know, I mean, whereas Enterprise, Alabama, I was at a few years ago, the Boll Weevil Festival, right? I mean, all these beautiful things across the country that you would never know about until you talk to someone who's there.
Yeah. Well, I love it because, you know, I think you're a natural fit for a partner with us on many levels, but especially around bringing people together to serve the community and get to know each other and civics, which leads to my next question. Why was it important for y'all to join Vet the Vote this year for 2024?
Yeah, I mean, civic engagement. I mean, literally participating in the democracy, and it's dramatic but true that we fought for, right? Like it's, as I learned in my Beverly Hills days, veterans need purpose, right? Like we need community, we need purpose. There is no greater purpose for a veteran than to help preserve the democracy that we fought and bled for, right? And that sounds dramatic, but it's, I mean, viscerally true. If we're questioning election integrity, if we're, you know, there's political violence, like that is not our country. That's some third world country stuff, right? And so, I mean, what a beautiful thing if you walk into for a veteran to physically, literally participate in democracy. But if you're a citizen engaging in voting, you see a veteran of the armed forces, like it gives you a sense of peace, I hope, right? Like this person is trusted, they're trained, they care, they've already sacrificed for this that I'm doing, right? I respect them. And so it fits beautifully within our civics pillar. And so, I think in Mission Roll Call, I was even excited about it. We sent it out in my previous organization. But there is something beautiful about literally participating in democracy and about helping to bring a calm and a peace and leadership to the churches and libraries around the country that people vote in.
Yeah, no, we agree. And it's so true, you know, that I've heard so many stories from friends who've served that they've engaged with other countries who are trying to get elections up and running. And that's something we've always been proud of. So kind of being able to do that back here at home is super gratifying.
It's special to me. I mean, I got to be in Iraq during the first ever provincial elections. And I got to be in Afghanistan when women were allowed to vote for the first time. So it's like, you know, you've probably seen the famous blue thumbprint photos with women. Like, I mean, it drives home how important it is for we are able to vote, and that it's a duty as a citizen to go vote. And an anecdote I have, I think last year I went and saw, I didn't work the polls. I was doing something else, but I had a buddy doing it. He's a double amputee, lost both legs in Afghanistan. I was working the polls, standing there with his robot legs on, and I never forget that, like a yellow cab taxi pulled up, like a literal taxi, and a lady gets out with two kids, and she's wearing a Waffle House apron, like clearly on the way to work, wrangling kids. Like, I mean, she is going through a lot of hoops to go vote, right? Before she gets to her shift at the Waffle House, and she's like looks at my buddy Dan and like nods, and it was just almost like the moment kind of encapsulated, I think, the whole purpose of veterans at polls, right? Like this lady is doing all she can to go vote, and this guy's standing there on prosthetic legs, like they just lock eyes and smile. It was to me kind of the entire, you know, purpose of veterans in polls, you know?
Yeah, that's it. That is the story. You're totally right. So how can veterans, military spouses, military family members get involved in More Perfect Union? What's the ask? What do we do?
There's many levels, Ellen. The first is to sign up at our website, mpu.us. And this is for any American, not just veterans and not just military spouses. I mean, if you want to start a brickyard, we can talk. We have programming for non-brickyard cities. We will, in the next month, open our application for the 2024 fellowship in Missoula, Montana, which we invest a lot in you. It's about a $9,000 a head investment we make to train you to go lead a brickyard. And we usually bring some pretty incredible leaders. Last year was National Security Advisor O'Brien and his buddy Sean Penn, who are polar opposites politically, but they like each other because they work on hostage negotiations together. Will train you to start a brickyard. And so sign up on the website, apply for the fellowship, and look, everyone says it, but it's true. Follow us on socials. We're also developing a pretty big digital media and social strategy because for us to have an actual impact, we got to touch millions of people, hundreds of thousands in real life. But also we got to showcase that so the rest of America can see, wow, there's the middle 80% of America isn't the problem. You got the 10% on the ends that are taking up all the bandwidth and are all the news stations and creating all the drama. Like, I really do think most of America, we're being gaslit as a country. We're not super divided. We all we see is like the crazies talking, right? Like regular people don't make the news. You had a cup of coffee with someone who didn't watch your news station. That's not news, right? And so we're going to start showcasing that in a better way through digital media and video storytelling. But so all to say is sign up, follow, apply for the fellowship.
There you have it, folks. We absolutely love that. Ellen, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to ask one last question. What's the story of the flag behind you?
That flag flew above I had 3 combat outposts in Afghanistan. I ran as a commander. That was the flag that flew above the headquarters outpost. And I like to think that you can see a hole in there. I like to think it's a bullet hole in it, but it's probably a cigarette burn from a soldier on guard. I don't know, but I like to think it's a bullet hole because we were in some gunfights over there. But that is a reminder of my time in Afghanistan. So great question. Appreciate that.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Garrett, thank you so much. There you have it, folks. More perfect union. The goal is in the name. That's something that we all serve to defend and support our Constitution within the United States. And couldn't be more excited to have you as part of the Vet the Vote team in 2024. Ellen, any final thoughts?
Be part of it.
No, thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast episode interesting or useful, please share it with the people you know. This episode was co-hosted by Joe Plunzler and Ellen Gustafson. The audio and video were edited by Cameron King. And this podcast is a production of We the Veterans and Military Families, a 501c3, not-for-profit, nonpartisan, veteran-led organization focused on promoting positive and patriotic civic engagement to strengthen American freedom and liberty. Find out more about us at wetheveterans.us and follow us on social media.